Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's your boy DKEN, and welcome to my incredible podcast. Now, before we commence this episode, do not forget to Hulk smash that like button, subscribe to my fat ass channel, share this with your boys and your fat ass families, follow me on Instagram, smash that bell notification button, and of course, as always, please sit back and enjoy the show. Let's get started. Our top story for today shall be Bill Cosby's conviction got overturned and has recently been released from prison. Now, using the power of the force, I can sense that a lot of you were not expecting this day to arrive at all in our doorsteps. Or better yet, I am certain that a lot of you were not looking forward to this at all. I will be fair. I was not expecting the court to overturn this decision at all. I remember way back, specifically back in 2018, I was sitting on the couch a long time ago watching this whole thing go down, and I was sitting down with my dad watching the news. We had witnessed a bunch of victims that came forward and accused Bill Cosby of drugging these women and then assaulting them. As my dad and I were watching the news, we just could not take our eyes off of the television when we saw more and more victims coming forward and accusing this guy of sexual assault. Now, at that time, this was when I had just graduated from a university with my bachelor's degree, minoring in law, okay? Majoring in criminal justice, okay? So back then, I started to ask myself lots of questions, such as the following. If something happened to them, why didn't they come forward a long time ago? Why did they wait all this time to come forward? Based on the statutes of limitations, how much time do these victims have left until they cannot come forward? These are questions that I started to ask myself because just like a lot of you, I needed answers badly. It turns out that during the civil case that Bill Cosby agreed to testify in, he admitted to giving quaaludes to certain victims that he was interacting with, which became key evidence that the prosecution used against him during the criminal trial. Now, back then, I also asked myself this question. What would motivate someone to do something like this? Because Bill Cosby, who was at that time known as America's Dad, a guy who had a solid reputation, very well known and loved by various communities, was now being accused by 60 women for a heinous crime. Back then in 2018, this story blew my mind away so much, it was simply too painful for me to accept the reality of his situation. After he got convicted and sentenced to a Pennsylvania state prison, I started to keep myself on high alert as to who else can be capable of committing such crimes. I'm sure that a lot of you may have guessed it by now, Harvey Weinstein. However, let's try not to get sidetracked. That's a completely different story altogether, but I promise you, we will get to him another day. For starters, let me show you a compilation of clips in regards to his release. Check out this clip.
Bill Cosby feasting on pizza as fury erupts over his shocking release. Bill Cosby is in the kitchen right behind us on his first full day of freedom. The question now is, what does the future hold for the man once known as America's Dad? Cosby also spoke out in a call to a Philadelphia radio station.
Now get a load of this.
This is not just a black thing. This is for all the people who have been imprisoned wrongfully, regardless of race, color, or creed.
Many of the 60 women who have come forward to allege Cosby sexually molested them are venting their outrage today.
Do you think you made a mistake in not charging Bill Cosby initially?
If I thought I could have convicted Bill Cosby in 2005, I'd have arrested him and prosecuted him personally.
Now, I know for a fact that just because he recently got released from prison, this automatically set off an outrage towards all sorts of people that leaned towards the left. Now, when I say that, I am of course referring to the feminist movement, the Me Too movement, the liberals. Basically, every leftist moron that we have in this country got so frustrated with this decision, Even the victims are going through the most difficult time ever right now. Remember, at least 60 women came forward and claimed that he assaulted them decades ago. 60. So I don't know how they're going to get through this. I spoke about this with my dad not too long ago, and he said that his conviction got overturned due to a technicality. Now, for those of you that do not understand what that means, I will not only explain it to you, I will also put up Google's definition on the screen right now. A technicality is what we consider to be a very tiny, yet a golden key detail that the authorities overlooked in a case. For instance, let's say a guy gets arrested for something he did, okay? If it involves searching the suspect's home, they are required to get a search warrant before entering in his premises. If the authorities failed to provide a search warrant to the suspect and they just barge into his home, not only did they fail to provide a search warrant to the suspect and they just barge into his home, not only did they violate the suspect's Fourth Amendment right, that's what's known as the fruit of the poisonous tree. That's the metaphor that the authorities go by. That's what a technicality means. It's when the cops overlook a small, but yet a very important detail of the case. Think of it this way. In order to get to point C, you must first start from point A, then get to B, and then you get to point C. You cannot just start from point A, skip B, and then end at point C. So with Bill Cosby's case, they must have overlooked a small yet a very imperative detail about his case. And because of that, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court comes in and throws his conviction out the window. After serving 3 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence, the Supreme Court comes in, throws his case out, and now check this out. He cannot be tried for the exact same offense. That's what's known as double jeopardy. For those of you that have never heard of this before, it's very simple to understand. Double jeopardy means you cannot be tried twice for the exact same offense. Last time I checked, I know for a fact that the state of New York has this in their laws. Now, let me present to you the first article titled, Bill Cosby Freed as Court Overturns His Sex Assault Conviction. Now, this article came out back in June 30th of this year and was updated back in July 2nd. Now, I'm only going to read to you the key details. It says, and I quote, Bill Cosby was released from prison Wednesday after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his 2018 conviction for sexual assault, a dramatic reversal in one of the first high-profile criminal trials of the Me Too era. The court's decision seemed likely to end the Pennsylvania case, legal experts said, and while more than 50 women across the nation have accused Mr. Cosby of sexual assault and misconduct, statutes of limitations in their cases makes further prosecutions unlikely. Mr. Cosby had served 3 years of a 3 to 10 year sentence at a maximum security prison outside Philadelphia when the court ruled that a non-prosecution agreement with the previous prosecutor meant that Mr. Cosby should not have been charged in this case. So, some of you may be asking, what is a non-prosecution agreement? Very simple. I shall put up Google's definition up on the screen right now. It's basically a formal written agreement between a government agency and a company or an individual that is currently under a criminal or civil investigation. Now, the government agency could be the DOJ, the Department of Justice, the SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It could be any of those big agencies. So, in Bill Cosby's case, he should not have been charged for his case back in 2018. It continues on, and I quote, the court's decision overturned the first major criminal conviction of the Me Too era, which came soon after allegations of sexual assault had been made against the powerful Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein. The accusations and eventual conviction of Mr. Cosby stunned the nation, painting a disturbing portrait suggesting that a man who had brightened America's living rooms as a beloved father figure had been a sexual predator. The case against Mr. Cosby began with his arrest in 2015 on charges that he had drugged and sexually assaulted a woman at his home in the Philadelphia suburbs 11 years earlier. In April 2018, the jury convicted Mr. Cosby of 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault against Andrea Constand, to whom Mr. Cosby had been a mentor and who was at the time a Temple University employee. Now, like I said earlier, Harvey Weinstein is a completely different story altogether. We'll get to him another day. Getting back to this article, now during this Me Too era, these progressive folks went in hard and they were desperate to find and crucify the men responsible for committing heinous crimes towards female victims. Now, typically, these guys were at the absolute top, meaning they had a very strong reputation. These guys were respected in the industry. These were the top of the line people, okay? And check this out. As soon as one of those individuals came forward and said something along the lines of, Me Too has become a witch hunt, all activists of Me Too would just lose their shit and go after those people. Even though they did not commit any crime, they would just do their utmost best to see if they can cancel that individual. Now, as I'm speaking about this, I feel like I'm treading on a razor's edge when I'm speaking about this because I want to choose the correct words for this situation. I need to make this one thing abundantly clear. It is not, I repeat, it is not in my intent to infuriate anybody at all. That is not what I have been doing this whole time. Just like many of you, I am legit shocked by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's ruling, and even though I do not agree with the court's ruling of reversing Cosby's conviction, the law simply said that his trial was considered unfair. But enough of the first article. Now let's advance to the second article titled, Explainer, Why Bill Cosby's Conviction Was Overturned. Now this article came out back in June 30th of this year, and just like the first article, I shall read to you the key details. It starts with, and I quote, Philadelphia, AP. Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction was thrown out Wednesday by Pennsylvania's highest court in a ruling that swiftly freed the actor from prison more than 3 years after he was found guilty of drugging and molesting Temple University employee Andrea Constand at his suburban Philadelphia mansion. Cosby, 83, was the first celebrity tried and convicted in the Me Too era, and his conviction was seen as a turning point in the movement to hold powerful men accountable for sexual misconduct. Here's a look at the case against Cosby and the court's decision. Why did the court toss his conviction? The split court found that Cosby was unfairly prosecuted because the previous DA had promised the comedian, once known as America's Dad, that he wouldn't be charged over Constand's accusations. Cosby was charged by another prosecutor who claimed he wasn't bound by that agreement. So one of the previous DAs fucked up. So my response to that would be, well, what did you expect? He fucked up. Now Cosby's going to get away with it. And I think the people should be angry at the DA more than at Cosby. Let's continue with this article. It continues on, and I quote, the court said that's not the case. The justices found that Cosby relied on that promise when he agreed to testify without invoking his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in a lawsuit brought against him by Constand. The court concluded that prosecutor who later brought the charges was obligated to stick to that non-prosecution agreement, so the conviction cannot stand. The justices wrote that denying the defendant the benefit of that decision is an affront to fundamental fairness, particularly when it results in a criminal possession that was foregone for more than a decade. Here's what I would say to that. To all activists of the left, y'all progressive folks, you should be angrier at the prosecutor who fucked up. He chose to violate Bill Cosby's non-prosecution agreement. Cosby held his side of the bargain with this agreement, but the DA who chose to charge him did not. So why are you still focusing on the fact that Cosby just got released due to a technicality? So how about you focus on that DA who chose to say, oh, fuck the law, fuck the agreement, I'll just charge him. Why don't we dive into that? Let's get back to the article. It continues on, and I quote, "What's the deal with the non-prosecution agreement? The promise not to prosecute Cosby was made in 2005 by Bruce Castor, who was then the top prosecutor for Montgomery County. Castor was also on the legal team that defended former President Donald Trump during his historic second impeachment trial over the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol by his supporters. During a court hearing weeks after Cosby's 2015 arrest, Castor testified that he promised Cosby he wouldn't be prosecuted in the hopes that it would persuade the actor to testify in a civil case brought by Constant and allow her to win damages. Castor acknowledged the only place the matter was put in writing was in the 2005 press release announcing his decision not to prosecute, but said his decision was meant to shield Cosby from prosecution for all time. Folks, keep this in mind. In a civil case, the plaintiff who accuses the defendant of any offense is not required to bring forth that much evidence to prove that the defendant is guilty of something. This is what's known as the standard of proof. In a civil case, the court's job is to make sure that the one who is guilty of an offense is required to pay for damages. Nobody does jail time. That's their job. However, in a criminal case, the prosecutor who brings forth charges to a defendant on behalf of a victim is required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant had done something wrong. That's what separates a civil case from a criminal case. That concludes the second article. Now, before I wrap this whole thing up right now, I need to get a few points across. One, to the prosecutor that chose to violate Bill Cosby's non-prosecution agreement, I believe that was the worst fucking move that you've made, and you failed as a prosecutor. You chose to go behind the law's back. You thought that Cosby's conviction would stick, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, nope. And that's your fault. Own up to your fuck-ups. Two, like I said before, to all activists of the left, and you know who you are, the person that you should put more of the blame on is this fucking prosecutor. He chose to disregard the agreement. Had he not have done that, this whole situation would have been played differently. Three, because of how this has been handled, Bill Cosby got released and is now free due to a technicality. This question still remains to be answered. How the hell are these victims going to be able to pull through knowing that he had just been released? Now that's something to think about. So with all of that said, this concludes this episode of my incredible podcast. So thank you very much for watching. Do not forget to Hulk smash that like button, subscribe to my channel, share this with your boys and your families, follow me on Instagram, smash that bell notification button, and every single one of you have a wonderful and blessed day. Peace out.